Hello Team 613. I wanted to go over first lesson in programming, and in this case we're not going to talk about writing any software. We're going to talk about the physical network between the electronic devices that we're using. So, alright, so you've all seen us running the robot around, and you know that we have the C-RIO on board the robot, and then we also have back here our driver station, and we've had to connect them here with this wire, which is called a crossover cable. This is a simple network that we've set up here in order to control our C-RIO and communicate between it. The C-RIO is the computer on board our robot, and the driver station that you can see back here in this kind of blurry picture. All right. In our network, we have a few different components that are important. This is that C-RIO I was talking about. This is on board the robot, and it's the computer, the kind of the brains of the robot. We're going to have a camera on board this year, an axis camera. We have a router on board the robot. This router is a way to connect our C-RIO and our camera. It's a way to connect them to our computer or our driver station here. Okay. Now, when we are programming the computer or programming the robot, we will connect the computer to our router, and then we'll connect the router to the C-RIO and the router to the camera. When we are driving the robot, what we're going to do is we won't connect the router to the computer. We'll connect it to the driver station. Now, as you can see here, these are our components in our network. When you have a network, you have to have a way for each component to address each other, and this is called an IP address. So let me go ahead and click on here. IP address stands for an Internet Protocol address. So these are the IP addresses for our network here. Our C-RIO is 10.6.13.2. 10.6.13.11 is for our camera. 10.6.13.5 is for our driver station, and 10.6.13.6 is for our computer. All right, you'll notice a pattern here with these. The first set of digits, the 10.6.13, are the same for each of the components, and this is the IP address part that refers to our specific network. If you notice that what first did was they said you start with a 10 and then put a period, and then you're going to put your team number in here, and that's going to be how you're going to come up with the IP address for your network. The last digit right here signifies which component on that network we have. So component number 2 is your C-RIO, component number 11 is your camera, number 5 is your driver station, number 6 is your computer here. You don't need to fill up every single device number or component number in order. So we don't actually have one that is a .1. We don't have one that is .4, .7, 8, or 9, or 10. It's okay if you skip numbers here. So each component has the same beginning part of their IP address, but each one has to have a different device number right here. And this is how the components communicate amongst each other. So if the computer needs to communicate with the camera, it's going to send a message that will have a header inside of it, 10.6.13.11, whereas if it was communicating with the C-RIO, it would use this IP address. By the way, IP addresses are very important when it comes to talking about the internet, and certainly if you ever take a good computer science class, it would go into much more detail explaining how these all work. This is just a very short introduction. Now, what happens sometimes is if we're using this computer to both talk to our robot and communicate, but we also need to search the internet, what we would do is have this computer connect to a second network, which is the school's wireless network. And what can happen then is its IP address can automatically be changed to something that is designed to work on the school's wireless network. For example, 192.164.10.5 is just kind of a random IP address they came up with. Do you see a problem here at all? Okay, well, if this computer wanted to communicate with the CRIO and this was going to communicate back, they no longer could, because the CRIO would be sending a message to 10.6.13.5, but none of the components on this network have that IP address anymore. This one has been changed, and so this is no longer going to work. This is why you might have noticed that we try not to put our programming computer onto the wireless network, because that forces its IP address to be changed, and then you have to go back and you have to manually change this back to the correct IP address. So our preference is to keep this computer solely connected to our robot network, and if we ever need to surf the internet, we would use one of the school's laptops and try to keep this computer off the internet. But sometimes we do have to put this on the internet. Now, how can you tell if your devices are communicating correctly? Well, on that Dell computer and on our driver station, we have something called the Compact CRIO Imaging Tool. This is a tool that's designed to send a mini operating system over to the CRIO from your Dell computer. But what it will also do first is search and check to see if it can even communicate with the CRIO. And so this is a nice way to check to see if your IP addresses are set up correctly and if everything's communicating correctly. This one right here is searching for the CRIO, and it actually will come up with a message saying CRIO not found, because I didn't have the CRIO correctly connected to the computer when I was running this particular when I started up the imaging tool here. But this is a nice way to check to see if your network's working and if everything's communicating with each other. If you get into computer science add-on and you do some programming, another way to do this is to use a command line prompt. So if you bring up the command prompt and then you type in ping and then you put a space and then you list the IP address that you want to connect to, 10.6.13.5 for example, or if you wanted to try to connect to, let's say, your CRIO .2 or your camera .11. This is actually kind of a silly one because it's trying to ping itself. What this ping does is it tries to send a little packet of data to the device at this address, and then the device at that address would send a message back saying that it received it. And so this is another nice tool for checking to see whether this computer that you're working on can communicate with another computer or component on your network. So what happened here is this tried to send 32 bytes of data to this, but it wasn't able to reach it because the things were not configured correctly. So this tells us that there's a problem and that something's out of sync here. In this particular case, I didn't have this computer connected to the device I should have had it connected to. So let's say you run into a situation where you just cannot connect to the components you want to, and you need to change the IP address of a particular computer, for example the one you're on. Well, the first step is going to be to turn off the wireless card. There's a button or a switch on the side that you can use to turn off your wireless card. Once you have that, your computer is going to stop trying to pick up a new IP address from the network. Now, if you want to make a change, you're going to go to your control panels underneath your start button here. You're going to select View Network Status and Tasks. You're going to click on the connection that you have. For us, it would be a LAN connection, so you would click on that. After you've done that, this dialog box comes up. You would click on Properties. You would click on Internet Protocol version 4 TCP/IP v4. You would double click on that, and then that brings up this dialog box right here. And what we want to tell it to do is that we don't want to obtain an IP address automatically. We're going to click the box that says use this IP address, and we're going to enter in the IP address for our device. For example, we want to configure our computer so that its IP address is 10.6.13.6. Your subnet mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. What this does is it's kind of a you can think of it as a guard. It specifies what other components can connect to your computer. By putting 255.255.255 in these slots, it's telling the computer not to connect with any device that has a different number in this first piece, a different number than 6 in the second piece, and a different number than 13 in the third piece. So it's kind of masking your network so that this computer will only communicate with something that has an IP address that starts with 10, 6, and then 13. If you notice, our 6 here is because we are on the developer computer. If we were doing this on our driver station, I would make this, I would change the 6 to a 5. And then you hit OK. Your network should be set up. Your IP address should be set up, and then you would test again using either ping or using the imaging tool just to see if your computer can connect with your CRIO. And you can also use ping to see if your computer connects with the camera. Okay, so what did we talk about today? Well, we said that we have our network on our robot. It consists of some different components that are all connected to each other using Ethernet cables or crossover cables that are connected to your central router. We talked about how those devices address each other using a naming scheme that has come up for the internet, which is called an IP address. Our IP addresses all have the form 10.6.13. And then you use a number to specify which device on your network you want to communicate with. Every device that's connected to the internet has an IP address. So your smartphone has an IP address, an iPad would have an IP address, and a laptop has an IP address. And that's all configured automatically. So you never have to worry about doing that because and that's done automatically. However, on our network, as we've seen, sometimes you have to worry about whether it's set up correctly and you have to set it up yourself. We looked at some tools to test whether the components on your devices or components on your network are communicating, whether your laptop can connect to the CRIO. The CRIO imaging tool is a nice device, is a nice program to do that test. You can also run a ping on the command line to check to see if you can connect to a device with a certain IP address. And then we saw that if you do run into a problem, for example, if your IP address on your Dell had been reset because you had connected the Dell to a different network, we saw that you can use the Windows control panels to change your IP address. Okay, so here's just a little introduction to our network on our computer. All right, I'm going to put up in our folder some additional references. One is to the steps to configure your router so that your driver station and your robot can communicate wirelessly, which is another interesting thing to run to. I'll also put up some references to different tutorials that deal with this same information. Okay, thanks.